Hi there. How's everybody? My name's Dar, and I'm honored to be a co-facilitator of Raising My Voice, which is Bridges Reentry is sponsoring, and also Circles of Support out of New York. Raising My Voice is for those that were previously incarcerated, empowering them to tell their story. And tonight, I'm going to introduce to you Opalene Theriot, a wonderful woman. She has a wonderful story, and I can't wait for you all to hear it. Opalene, will you share your story with us?
Thank you, Dar. I knew he was there all along, but it was like talking to a brick wall. The dark of the night was when I felt most alone, and it would make me feel so angry. My blood would boil and my stomach would turn in fear. How could this happen? Why me? I'd start screaming and yelling with my fist in the air as tears poured out and cleansed my face of the 10-day-old Arizona dust. I felt so helpless with nowhere to turn. I walked aimlessly through the quiet suburbia with the sounds of my despair echoing off well-manicured lawns and the front door of family homes. I needed to find a place to sleep. My stupor had subsided and my brain shifted towards my need for survival. Where is the safest place for me to sleep? The park is too risky now. I've been arrested there 3 times already just for sleeping. I looked around. I examined each corner and bush to see if there was a safe place until my eyes stumbled upon a house for sale. It was a nice 2-story home with a stucco finish and red tile roof. The front door sat nestled next to the garage, which was on the right, and then on the right of that was a big lawn. It was connected to that park entrance where I developed that bad habit of leaving in handcuffs. I stuck my dingy Converse-covered feet into the bottom metal hinge of the fence since it was the only space I could find. And I used my arms to lift me high enough to, well, I still couldn't see over the fence. Now with my feet stacked upon one another, due to the space being so narrow, I lifted my feet to my tiptoes and could just barely see over the redwood fence. My chest felt tight like I was running out of breath, so I quickly scanned the backyard and I let go. I leaned over and I took a few deep breaths. I grabbed my backpack and I tossed it over the fence. And then I stared at that fence like it was Mount Everest, nearly impossible to climb. I shook my head visibly and I said out loud, "It's just a fence, Opalene, you're gonna have to try it." I took another deep breath and I put one foot in that narrow space of the fence and bent my knees, and then I jumped. I grabbed the top of the fence and I kicked high like a cheerleader. I got my knee over the fence, but I was still hanging on the same side I started. Oh, great. I mustered enough energy to pull myself up and then push myself to the other side. I was still pretty high, so I led with my feet, guiding myself down slowly. And when I was close enough to the ground, I let go, and I landed on safe ground. I grabbed my bag, I curled it into a ball, and I laid in a corner of where the house met the fence to keep me warm. I closed my eyes and I grumbled to God, "Can you at least keep me warm?" And then my demeanor softened. And then I asked God nicely, "God, take your big arms. Please just hold me close, God, and keep me warm." I would repeat the nice version of that question for years to come. And it has, in fact, become a staple in my relationship with God. You see, God kept me warm that night. He sang to my heart along every beat to remind me that I am still alive. He soothed my soul as a mother would with an upset child. He told me to hang on, so I did. I struggled with mental health my whole life. And through my agony, I stumbled upon drugs as a way to cope. At a very young age, I had realized I was different than most people. I was even different from my own family. My entire immediate and extended family, they were all deaf, they couldn't hear. And they all wore that deaf as a proud badge of honor. Now, life wasn't easy for them, but they thrived when they had a community of their own. And indeed, it was a culture and it was a way of life. But as a young girl, this was a point of contention. I really struggled with my identity. More than anything, I wanted to belong and be like my family. I just didn't feel like I ever fit in. My childhood consisted of fantasies of me running away. I was always putting myself at the center of danger and needing some kind of escape route. My imagination ran wild. It's funny how child's play was so indicative of my pain and confusion. I never processed that confusion, and I didn't have anyone to really guide me through those crucial years. And then when I was 10, true depression sank in. It was the same year that I'd first been molested. A few years later, raped. The pain was so unbearable. I coupled the narrative of not belonging along with now being damaged. My self-esteem was as low as a rug lying on the floor, but I always had a spiritual feeling at my core that God was all around. That was my source of hope to still hang on. But because I had no tools for coping and my household became more and more dysfunctional as I got older, I leaned into crowds where the kids were just as misguided as I was. It was actually my senior year in high school when I tried heroin for the first time. But back then I decided it wasn't for me. I experimented with other drugs too, but nothing close to becoming habitual, but definitely enough to deteriorate my mental health. I became severely depressed, and I decided to move to California. Yeah, I cried every night. Being new to a town was just too much for me to bear, especially for someone who was as depressed as I was. Now, on the outside, everything looked okay. I was enrolled in college full-time. I had a good job. I worked out. I dated. I spent time with my family. But the feelings of sadness and anxiety were always lurking around. And the second I was alone, like driving in my car or being at home, the tears turned on like a faucet. I was miserable. I sought professional help, but something else came along that seemed to really change everything for me. A coworker offered me a pain pill when I complained of my wrist hurting from writing notes in school and then interpreting my job English to ASL. The pain went away, but not just the physical pain. All of the emotional pain was gone, and it was like I was seeing the world through a new lens. It was a miracle drug, I thought, and instantly it became an everyday thing for me. I self-medicated like this for years until my body couldn't handle the OxyContin anymore. Every time I ingested just the tiniest bit, I became violently ill. I had no choice. I had to quit. My body rejected the man-made chemicals that Purdue Pharma had made. But by then, taking a substance, well, that was my way of coping. And because I couldn't do the pills, I started experimenting with other drugs and drinking. I moved to Arizona hoping for a fresh start, but I returned to using drugs. I tried getting clean on my own so many times, but the depression, it was just too much. The anxiety would send my mind into a million places while I remained stuck. It felt like fight, flight, and freeze all rolled into one. Overwhelming, huh? My addiction led me to commit crimes to sustain that addiction. It wasn't long until I found myself on my way to prison. All my choices were to escape that pain, just like the little girl packing her tiny suitcase with toys and clothes, putting on a disguise, wrapping my blanket around my face like a scarf, and running away on a train. Except now I was on a different kind of train. I was on a bus full of broken women going to Perryville prison to stay for 6 years. Now, prison didn't turn out to be such a terrible thing. Now, don't get me wrong, prison sucks, but I made a conscious effort to change my life. That intention God heard in my heart. One day, I overheard something about a women's treatment unit. It was referred to as WTU. I asked the counselor what it was, and she said, "Oh, I don't know much about it, but I'll get you some information." Within 2 weeks, I was moved to the unit Santa Maria, where the WTU program was located. And for the next 18 months, I engaged in group therapy, individual therapy. I was educated on meditation, forgiveness, radical acceptance, unhealthy thinking patterns, anger management, healthy relationships and boundaries, effective communication, and so much more, all things that I had never been exposed to before. It was having that opportunity to finally address my mental health and learning those coping skills that finally led me to work a program for my drug addiction, and then led me to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. This is what changed my life. I always knew I could feel God's presence, but I was so disconnected I couldn't hear what he was saying. I was the brick wall, it turns out. Brick by brick, I was able to find new ways of coping, and I continue to heal every day. It saddens me that programs like this barely exist at Perryville. Out of 4,000 women, only 24 are admitted to that program at a time. I am often amazed at the transformation I've experienced just by learning about mental health. Think of the impact if programming like this was offered to more inmates within the prison population. I know the impact it had on my life. Imagine the impact on thousands more. Thank you so much for listening to my story.